All right, this is Monday, the 25th of October 2021, and we are starting part A of the Khoodeelaar television channel, broadcast only on the internet and from London in the quote UK. When we say quote UK, we really mean within quotations because it's not our choice to call it the UK within quotation. It's based on the evidence of the Boris Johnson-fronted cabal's behavior, attitude, policy, strategy about the constitution of the UK, which is all unfit for purpose and which is evil land, because the banner of this broadcast says Justice for Baby Angel Geronimo. That sums up the actual theme and the narrative for this program, which includes all the injustices, our condemnation of all the injustices that are known. Now, it's not just the Boris Johnson-fronted cabal that is unfit for purpose. It's every single element, every single part of the so-called state, which is in total darkness, in denial. So these financial crimes, why do we call it the financial crimes? Because it doesn't tell the truth about the finance, about the economy, about the behavior of the business at any level whatsoever. It is a lying organ, the difference being the focus on things financial, but it actually lies about the finance and financial behavior. And we shall be looking at the various words that the financial crimes uses that may give the impression that it is against corruption, against bribery. For example, on page 10 today, the heading is Mozambique counts cost of tuna bond bribe scandal. And it says the subheading is Credit Suisse, the Swiss bank, played key role in fraud case that derailed a nation's economy. That is absolutely accurate as the headline goes, but it's not complete picture. It doesn't actually hold. Even the financial crimes doesn't hold anyone to account in its report. Again, there is an accurate heading, only up to a point, to a piece by Rana Faruhar. Remember, the woman Rana Faruhar is from the Middle East, Middle Eastern descent. The heading to her piece is Biden's bid for banks that serve the people. Those last three words, serve the people, of course, is the correct part of the heading. The rest is not. and it is running a piece, promotional piece for Saudi Arabia. Heading Saudi Arabia flexes its economic muscles. Again, it's not the whole truth. So it's actually kind of appeasing the Saudi regime. The piece is an appeasing piece. But this is the picture that I want to comment on extensively. This picture of bereavement. That's on the right of this screen is, of course, Alec Baldwin. And behind him is the widower of Helena Hutchinson, Matthew Hutchins. And the shortest image is, of course, Hutchins, Helena's son, 9-year-old son, who was speechless for 2 days after being told of the death of his mother. He is the only child of Matthew Hutchins and Helena Hutchins. Now this picture, very rare, because it's not a glamorous photo, which is what Fleet Street and the mainstream media often prefer to run. This is a picture of Alec Baldwin, whose photographs have been consistent, at least the published photographs have been consistent in video, in visual kind of image. He is visibly distraught. And that's the mirror running that picture and an insert of Helena herself and an image of Alec Baldwin hugging Matthew Hutchins. And this is the mirror, 2 pages, and the 2 pages have got the words hugs for a dead and son left in pieces. It says that there is a shorter piece on at the bottom of the right hand column on the Daily Mirror. Where an expert, Zach Knight, said there should never have been a live rounds on a movie set. And so on. This is not anywhere near what we have been saying. We said that weapons should be banned. All weapons should be banned from film sets. Absolutely full stop. And the other thing we have said, and we shall be expanding on, which the papers are not doing, is that Hollywood itself, the culture of Hollywood, what this let's say, for the time being, let's say the tragedy. What Helena's death actually sums up is the wrong culture, the deadly culture, the cruel culture, the corrupt culture of violence that has been encouraged by Fleet Street, through Fleet Street, and based on Hollywood and the very powerful promotion of the Hollywood film industry. The Guardian is not the Guardian, but the Daily Mirror. I think we should check the actual title. Well, not the Mirror. I remember this is in Fleet Street's Financial Crimes. We're talking about somebody who is digging up old films, movies, Hollywood movies. And the subheading, the caption near a number of pictures reads that all the films are made by men. Now that is clearly quite easily understood and easily conveyed. But that's not the only wrong. Not only are the films made by men, but the agenda, the narrative, the commentary is pornographic. The use of the term pornography is not lightly made here, because women's bodies have been used as the central attraction. One way or the other, whatever the kind of story, whatever the full story in a particular movie, the main attraction for the customer, the selling, has been bodies of women. And it is evident in the actual contents of the films. The footage tells the story. So this particular event, is now forcing references to previous kind of incidents, like this one in the Times on page 5. This one says that Alec Baldwin crew make a difference between Baldwin himself and the crew. And it says fired live rounds before fatal shooting. So it's not the only time that they use the live rounds. What I'm saying is that the entirety of the Hollywood so-called industry is based on violence. Western films based on absolute gratuitous violence. And there is no need. So instead of responding to latent propensity for violence, in the ordinary kind of population. Hollywood actually has been imposing, inflicting, encouraging, developing, justifying violence. And the discussion about the right to bear arms in the USA has been incomplete and has been negligently left incomplete by the continuation of gun violence scenes in the scripts of the Hollywood movies and films. Every level, every excuse. And that includes, of course, the 007 films. Violence. And what the scripts and the writers and the authors and the producers and the promoters and the sellers of these violent films have done since 1945, since the end of the so-called Second World War. They've actually shown contempt to all the resolutions, all the opinions, expressions of comments and anxieties about violence, gun violence and warfares and murders. The Hollywood filmmakers have been showing contempt, total and utter contempt. And the fact that this young woman called Armorer, she's pictured with this in guns, and she is now said to be distraught herself. Now she's described as age 24, and her name is, she has got a double-barrel surname, but here she's named as Hannah Gutierrez. And there is a picture of a participant in the vigil in honor of Helena Hutchins. Now, this young person, 24-year-old, has been described already in the online versions and in the print versions of the updates as having been inexperienced and green, and also having herself been unsure as to whether she should have been involved in the handling of the weapons. On the other hand, it has been alleged or asserted that she was careless, including the assertion that she gave a loaded gun to an 11-year-old to play with. Now, this is not going to be the only kind of reference to an armorer or a person involved in filmmaking doing that kind of dangerous thing. When fuller facts are kind of published, it will become known that playing with loaded arms on Hollywood sets has been quite open and rampant, which takes us all the way to the subcontinent, and mainly what is called Bollywood and the Bombay sets and now the expanding compared to Bombay, they expand in cinema south in the languages Telugu, Tamil, Malayalam, Kannada, and to some extent Bengali in West Bengal. Use of violence on all these films, which are mainly sold as kind of blockbusters. Use of violence and use of guns and use of knives is absolutely horrendous. Too high frequency. And the reliance on the use of guns is very heavy. And the only consistent thing that all the different so-called films share is the use of guns and knives and use of violence. And the films that are made in these various different languages really are not, in terms of the themes, in terms of the scripts, different at all. They are only different in the facts that the use of the languages is intended to address the customers so that they can understand the story in their own language. Apart from that, there is no difference. As we said at the beginning, when we started looking at the Cinema South about a year ago. And we are doing this as part of the contextual historical analysis of films starting from August 1947. August is obvious, 1947. Some of the films have been making token references to M.K. Gandhi, Jawaharlal Nehru, even to the Netaji Subhash Bose. That's it. They make references, but they don't actually contain anything like a narrative description of what those names are about. So therefore, the contents of the films, mainly in Bombay, and now currently Bombay is going down in terms of the market share. So the main kind of actors and actresses are moving away from Bombay and are basing themselves in the areas where the market is rising. And the complications in a storyline are false because they are not really original substance. They're violent. And of course, very heavily, because of the Indian subcontinent and the culture, the difference between Hollywood and the subcontinent in terms of culture, in terms of the kind of exposure to sex is different. It's only different, not kind of absent. it is a different angle. And it is getting, the difference also is disappearing. Increasingly, the pornographic aspect of the content of the woman's body is rising. And in the storyline, there is nothing original about Subhash Bose at all, or about M.K. Gandhi. So the violence is there, the sex is there, and the continuation of the violence as the kind of unquestioned norm is not helping the viewers or the fans or the customers, because the customers are not being told in the narrative, not necessarily in terms of speeches, about the substance of independence, the substance of freedom, and the substance of the heritage, cultural heritage for the many, for the benefit of the causes of justice, equality, and all that. So the token references to Subhash Bose, M.K. Gandhi, and the ridiculously even more token references to Abul Kalam, these references are not being substantiated by a narrative that is complete, a narrative that is enlightening, the narrative that is consistent with the promise of independence. We shall go back to India in due course, but we come back to Fleet Street. And although Fleet Street is still referring to Alec Baldwin, it is decreasing the volume. But whatever the volume of content about the, let's say, accidental shooting of Helena Hutchins, the Fleet Street papers are not doing anything different. They're not questioning the gun culture. They may be doing it after we have made this particular broadcast, but they are not doing it now. They haven't done it so far. Now, the death of Helena occurred on Thursday. So there is a kind of 12-hour or so gap between the US media and the UK, but this is Monday. So Saturday was the earliest that they could actually have any in-depth kind of descriptions. Saturday and Sunday, 2 days. And today is Monday, so 3 days. 3 substantial days since the tragedy. And the Fleet Street papers haven't caught up with the real problem, which is what we have outlined. Why should there have been any guns on set or in the script at all? They haven't questioned that. Not as far as I can see. They should be doing that. And guns should be banned. But they're saying this on the start that Helena's family have forgiven Alec. Well, that may be so, but that is not what we are saying. We are saying that the whole thing about guns being there should be the focus. Number two is that whoever organized the kind of recruitment of technical staff must be held accountable, because not long before the actual shooting of Halina, technical staff, unionized staff, walked away from the set. And they were swiftly replaced by non-unionized staff. So what did the producers, one of whom is of course Alec Baldwin himself, what did they think of the rights of the technical staff that actually have now been proven absolutely, shockingly correct in one of their concerns, which was the safety, lack of safety? And this actually reminds us of the line that the liar, Nigel Lawson's liar son, Nigel Lawson's liar son, Dominic Lie's son, actually expressed the opinion as part of his lying brief after David Amis was murdered by the Somalian descended person. Dominic Lie's son said that being right-wing doesn't mean that they don't care. Well, it does mean that they don't care, because the right-wing is the idea that is always dominant in the narrative promoted by Fleet Street and the counterparts, American press, the New York press. The hostility to trade unions is common between the UK and USA and Canada, the mainstream, the governments, the regimes. And this one is absolutely spot on. The trade unions involved in the walkout from Alec Baldwin's set got it absolutely right. Safety is one of the most central, vital reasons for organizing workers. And trade unions have been absolutely right on every issue whenever they have been allowed to raise concerns about safety. When I say allowed, there is the giveaway. Allowed because the trade unions are mainly led by crooks. Trade unionists are not crooks, and the trade unions themselves have got constitutions that are not corrupt in the main. But the leadership of the majority of the trade unions is corrupt, is opportunistic, and is a sellout. That's the difference. But on this occasion, in the reported walking out from the Alex Baldwin film, the trade unions got it absolutely right. In a historic way, they've got it more right than most of the walkouts are known for. Because this lack of safety is one of the things that they were walking out for. That is, walking out over. So the one question that has been in the kind of first reports with the photographs of Baldwin has been his question, why was I handed a live gun? That is one question. But the other question, which he hasn't been reported as having posed, is why was there any reason or any excuse or any part of the script that entailed anyone shooting a gun, whether blank or live? That is what we have been addressing. So it's about the culture of filmmaking, culture of films writing, culture of film management of the production, all sorts of issues. And although it is now reported that Bolton is likely going to be charged with involuntary manslaughter, this is a double-edged sort of thing. Manslaughter itself is partly involuntary as opposed to murder, and involuntary manslaughter makes the charge lighter than it would be usually. And this armorer, Hannah, did a podcast last month in which she admitted that she was nervous about being given the job on a film she was involved in making with the actor Nicolas Cage. And she was nervous, so she almost didn't take the job. So at least there is this evidence that this is not a callous individual. She may be careless, but she is not callous on this evidence so far. So it again shows the management, the people who make the decisions about whether to give any person the job of handling weapons. Filmmaking should not involve weapons. Full stop. But again, that may be the fact that it is not the case, that is, the filmmaking is still heavily involved with guns and weapons, is to do with the culture of the wrong culture, the deadly culture, the murderous culture, the mass murdering culture that is still dominant in the USA, that says that bearing arms is a human right for them, or the American right. Well, that right, if it becomes deadly, if it kills, is not a right at all. And it is time that this was ended. Okay, so we have done this particular edition. We have done this edition just over, I think, half an hour. And we shall be continuing the diagnosis of Fleet Street in the second part, definitely, part B. And just to recap, this is called the Baby Angel Geronimo editions. And it is about justice, about rights, about peace, transparency, accountability, and the absence The absence of accountability, due process, and rule of law from everything that is done in the name of the so-called United Kingdom government and in the judiciary, through the judiciary, via the judiciary, by the MPs, in the name of the MPs, etc., etc. When I say in the name of MPs, of course, the name of the single MP that has been most prominent in the news and the media is that of David Amis. Now, since the murder, because we call it murder because the man was murdered by this idiot, why is it that they are talking only about the murder and not talking about the general role of members of parliament? Nothing to do with this murder, but there has to be clear replacement of the current position allowed to MPs to ignore constituents. This was not a constituent who murdered David Amis anyway. Ordinary constituents in ordinary constituencies, are they served by their current MP? Nothing to do with any threat. Ordinarily, do MPs serve their constituents, their electors? Because when there is a reference to a thing called constituency surgery, what is not ever reported by Fleet Street or the rest of the media is what goes on between the particular constituent and the MP. Leave out the sensational, quote, high-profile events. For example, when an MP, whoever the MP is, has got a constituent like Nazanin Ghaffari Ratcliffe, detained in Iran, that gets covered in the media for obvious reasons. But millions of constituents have got millions of exchanges between themselves and the MP's office, not necessarily by the MP. What are those exchanges about? To what extent are they substantial? And to what extent do they produce the result, the outcome that are needed? So we shall be talking about all of those in part 2 and beyond. And of course, we shall recap on the overdue justice deserved by baby angel Geronimo. The lies that the depraved DEFRA has been perpetrating against baby angel Geronimo. Those lies are lies, and they are lethal lies, and they are criminally intended lies, and those lies must be totally, expressly, extensively withdrawn. And baby angel Geronimo must be given the justice that he is absolutely, perfectly in the best health, and he has never had any problems with any disease, and he has been defamed by the criminals, depraved DEFRA, and the criminals have included Boris Johnson and Keir Starmer. So these two, plus the 3 judges who have lied against baby angel Geronimo, Trevor Terrible Phillips has been given a piece by the Mail Group, and Trevor Terrible Phillips, the nephew Tom, the mental slave, official mental slave, he has been given the kind of creepy role. He creeps up whenever something like, let's say, David Amis gets in the news. On the one hand, and the other hand involving either a Muslim or an ethnic person or a black person. Up crops the terrible mental slave, Trevor Terrible Phillips. And Phillips is used, as we have said in the post earlier today on the Twitter accounts. Phillips is, let's say, broadly speaking, noticeably dark-skinned. But there are other dark-skinned or darker-skinned mental slaves that are serving the racist regime fronted by Boris Johnson. Trevor Terrible Phillips has been serving previous incumbents in government posts, including Haque Harman. Hattie means Harriet Harman. Harriet Harman and the Guardian's Polly Toynbee are two white women who have been overtly promotional about, quote, Trevor, as they put it. It's like they are politically, in a political structure, in a political space, it is their mental slave. And so therefore the purpose of the existence of Trevor Terrible Phillips is to undermine opposition to injustice, opposition to racism, and especially to undermine those people who oppose anti-Muslim attacks. Trevor Terrible Phillips was kind of installed in the 1970s by the National Union of Students. And ever since, the mental slave has been given one platform after another. He is the longest serving mental slave in Britain who has been sponsored by the racists, either in Fleet Street or in the media, or by various government kind of agencies like Haque Harman put him to chair the racist anti-Muslim organization. It was Haque Harman who actually used Trevor Terrible Phillips to break up the Commission for Racist Enslavement, CRE. This is our description. This is my description. Commission for Racist Enslavement. I have been opposing the Commission for Racist Enslavement from the moment, literally from the moment it was launched in April 1977. And I challenged the first chair of the Commission for Racist Enslavement, David Lane, at the launch event held somewhere near Fleet Street. Shoe Lane, I think, there was an event. So while I have been opposing the commissions for racist enslavements, the mental slave Terrible Phillips has been promoting the very things that I've been opposing. So I'm not a casual observer of the terrible Phillips. I'm a very engaged opponent of the agenda that he's serving, and his masters and mistresses, political masters and mistresses that have been operative excessively, that is to say, in public, to the spies and others that operate in secret and have been briefing him and bolstering him and encouraging him. I cannot comment on them because I cannot see them excessively. And Trevor Terrible Phillips has been given the space by the Mail Group this weekend to condemn all opposition to empire, all influences of empire, and all imperialist lies and injustice, oppression, and slave trade, and all the rest of it. So, all these bad things that the state agencies do, like the depraved DEFRA, defaming the most innocent baby angel Geronimo, Trevor Terrible Phillips pretends not to see or hear about. And it is that kind of violation, the violation collectively of the rights of baby angel Geronimo and baby angel Geronimo's right to justice, that affect most people, affect most decisions, and contain and concern the most amounts of wrongs and damages and harms and detriments. And Trevor Terrible Phillips never sees any of those things. He jumps up, he's triggered whenever a black-faced front is needed by his political masters and mistresses to appear to give his opinion against black people, like Lenny Henry started off by doing. Lenny Henry, who is in his 60s now, was given the platform as a black-skinned comedian on the mainstream. And his main materials were based on mocking various African, supposed African characters. There is no justification whatsoever for doing that, but that's what he did. Now he's claiming that he had a kind of lonely journey. Nobody asked him why he was doing those things, mocking African people, Caribbean people, characters, and caricatures that he created, or his creators, his managers, his manufacturers created. So Lenny Henry, on the one hand, and Trevor Terrible Phillips on the other hand, these are the two mental slaves that have been consistently deployed to undermine and to dehumanize and to demonize characters and communities. Just like baby angel Geronimo has been demonized by the criminals. So we shall be continuing in the next parts